Hello and welcome to another Reporting Depp v Heard update. In fact, it's going to be the last before we go on a short break. That noise that you can hear behind me, or may be able to hear behind me, are a pair of really aggressive Canada geese, which I have discovered like to hang around outside Fairfax County Court making a nuisance of themselves. I will not be distracted though, I will be very professional and I will introduce our park bench guests. Yes, we have two guests today to round off the first 4 weeks of this trial. Today, Amber Heard gave evidence on the stand. It was her first full day of giving evidence. She wasn't cross-examined, she was telling her story, and she told it very emotionally. She told the court some graphic injuries that she said she'd suffered at the hands of Johnny Depp, and she went through her version of lots of incidents that we've basically heard lots about before, whether it was in the UK trial or whether it was by reference from someone else. But of course, when you have someone who purports to be a victim talking very emotionally about the experiences they say they went through, it can make for a very intense day. And I think everyone who was in court today came out of it feeling something. But I have to say, again, there were an awful lot of people who were in court who just thought Amber Heard was a fantasist and making all this up. So to debrief the day, we've got another park bench interview, and I will be back at the end for a little bit more waffle to tell you what is happening with the rest of this trial. See you in a bit. I have John, who is joining us for the first time, and I have Liz, who is joining us for the second time. Now, John, I'm going to get your perspective first. As a lawyer, what did you make of what you saw in court today? And particularly the amount of objections that were happening all the time. Because this is something, my English friends are tweeting me, direct messaging me all the time going, what is going on? Why are you not allowed to say what someone said to you? Or no, why are you not allowed to say what you said to someone else? Even though you said it, and you know you said it, but you can say what they said to you. What's going on?
It's a question of reliability. It's better to have someone else validate what you said than for you to validate it yourself. Because in the absence of an additional party validating that you did in fact say what you said, if that makes sense, then there's some gray area, and it's open to some question of whether you did actually say what you said.
But then you could say, well, you don't know whether you saw what you actually saw.
This is true as well, but the American court system has a very specific and time-honored set of rules of evidence, and the hearsay rule is the big one that kept coming up today.
Yes. And it is hearsay to say what you said to someone.
In some cases, in most cases, yes. One of the things that I think was a problem was actually Amber Heard's attorney, the woman who was
Elaine Brederhoft.
Yes, who was conducting the direct examination. I was surprised, given the reputation that she has and given the caliber of the level of importance of this trial. I was surprised. My personal view was that she was not as well prepared, and maybe she was struggling a little bit because of the amount of pressure and because it was all under the spotlight
So
and
you
on
think
television. She should not have made a lot of the mistakes that she made.
And the reason that they were mistakes is because Camille Vasquez, Johnny Depp's attorney, was butting in, but I know that was her job. I don't mean that pejoratively. She was raising objections
Yes.
On a regular basis, and the judge was siding with her a lot of the time, wasn't she?
In a number of cases, it was the same problem 2 and 3 and 4 times in a row.
Yeah.
And you could tell that the judge was getting a little bit
little
irritable
testy.
about that.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll mention, though, and this is a question of trial strategy, you were talking about the number of objections that were being raised. Jurors tend not to like objections.
No, because it completely breaks the narrative flow.
It totally
As a
does.
human being, as a layperson watching it,
Yes.
you're suddenly in the process and you're not in the narrative.
Right, and to say nothing of the fact that when an objection is raised and then you have to turn on the white noise and have a sidebar where the attorneys approach the bench and have a chit-chat with the judge, that becomes even more irritating to the jury. So the question then is, as you pointed out, to what extent do you want to derail what's going on? And sometimes
it
will.
can be a tactical thing. Oh, this is a good bit. I better raise an objection in case the jury get too into it.
Yes, and actually, that one of the things that I found interesting today was that in some cases when Amber Heard was very emotional
Mm-hmm.
and talking about very, very difficult and very
Mm.
awkward subjects, and there was an objection raised, she seemed to sort of turn off the emotion and just sort of became kind of stoic and sat there and waited. And then when the questioning resumed, all of a sudden she kind of put the emotion back on and started, dabbing her eyes with her handkerchief.
Let me bring this up with Liz then, but I want to come back to you because I have many more process questions about the American
Okay.
legal system. It's a learning curve for me.
Absolutely.
So, Liz, I was watching a woman talk and we can't talk in very graphic terms because this is a family podcast, but I heard a woman talk in very graphic terms about what was done to her, what she says was done to her, sorry, and the horrendous allegations which we all know have been percolating around this case. But again, when you actually hear someone who purports to be the victim in court talking about them, they do have impact. And you came out of the courtroom and you just said, God, that's intense. And you looked visibly distressed quite late in the day. Tell me why, first of all, you walked out of court in the way that you did.
Well, we were getting to that point where it was getting ready to be time to leave, and I kind of wanted to go see the cars off in case I don't make it back here before the end of this. But also, I just kind of had enough of not of her and not of her testimony, because it's really important that we get that information, as I said last time. But it was so intense, and there were times where it felt like we were never going to get another break. And they lengthened the day today by a half hour. They're lengthening when we come back. Every morning we're starting at 9.
It is becoming an endurance test, this.
And then they're gonna go from 9 to 5, and it's.
So was it the intensity of the process? Was it the intensity of the subject matter itself? Or?
It was both.
Right. But what, so, I mean, I have been sitting just outside court. I went into the overflow court earlier, and I've been sitting outside court so I can watch what's going on online while this is all playing out. And all of the social media accounts, bar one or two, that I saw on Twitter, almost everyone making a comment on YouTube, bar one or two, was saying this woman's a liar. This woman is a liar. She's lying about her experiences. She's lying from start to finish. Now, I don't get to see that many televised trials, but we talked at the weekend about how Johnny Depp appeared to be winning the social media war on this. This was a woman who, if she is what she's saying is true, she is describing some of the most appalling acts, and yet there doesn't seem to be. Maybe I'm in a little bubble because I get to know people who are here for Johnny Depp and they're here because they support him. Maybe I'm in a little bubble, but I just don't understand what's going on here.
So, I was a theater major in high school. Shocker, everyone. And
You learned how to project.
Yes, I did. But also, I know how to spot fake crying.
Yeah.
I know how to spot acting in a certain sense. I think there were times where her crying was very forced. And I mean, she's an actress. That's kind of her job when she's working. And I get that. And I think she brought a little bit of that today. And I think maybe there is a little nugget of truth to some of what she has to say. I don't think most of it is the full honest truth. But we discussed this. We're never going to know that.
But if she wanted to secure some kind of, this trial is not about a DV conviction. This trial is about libel. But if she wanted to leave some kind of, I hate using sort of phrases that imply violence, but if she wants to leave some kind of mark on Johnny Depp's reputation, she didn't have to go into the detail that she went into. She could come up with one or two instances.
Well, and that's where
But this detail, if she's making all this up, why go into this extraordinary detail?
Well, and it's tough because on one hand, I see her as someone who is reaching for that emotion most of the time. And I also see her as someone who's giving a somewhat incredible, somewhat convincing testimony on the stand. And I think that was the hardest part for me, especially like most of us in the gallery are women. And most of the friends that I have made here are women. And we would look at each other when photos would come up on the evidence boards and on those screens, and we're looking at them going, something doesn't look right with these, but she's so convinced, and maybe we're looking at it wrong. And then you kind of come into yourself and you're like, am I wrong? And it's really like this painful, like, if what she's saying is true, I've been a jerk to her
Yes.
forever. And she didn't deserve that. She's been abused enough.
Right.
And there is that nugget of like, it could be true, but you also see certain things where she kind of stumbles with certain facts. Where like all of a sudden something new comes up in her brain that somebody else brought up. And, you know, there's moments where you see these photos the photos of her face.
Yeah.
And she says that you can see certain things that you're not really seeing, and you're looking really closely at it. And again, if you've been around the theater world, you know how to make those look convincing. And so for me, I'm trying to come at this as non-biased as possible, and think with the logical part of my brain and say she could be telling the truth.
In the age of Me Too, it is very much more likely that people will hear allegations against someone who's accused of racial bias or domestic violence against a woman, or of any of those sort of social taboos that have come up. And notwithstanding that environment, I'm shocked at the number of people, especially women, in the courtroom who say, I don't believe a word of it. Those were all faked tears and faked this and faked that, and I'm not buying any of it.
So what's your take on it though?
There's so much to sort out. And to the point that she was making, it is actually a domestic violence case.
By proxy.
By proxy, under the umbrella of a libel case.
Yes.
The libel case.
We're saying goodbye to our deputies, as we do at this time.
By Fairfax County Motor
I managed to
Squad.
film. I tell you what I'll do is I'll overlay the shot that I took of them disappearing yesterday. Although there's only one leaving on this occasion by a different direction, but
Yes.
they always make this hell of a noise off camera.
That's a Harley Davidson police bike.
Yeah.
So fun fact, I think I know which bike that is. I used to have a buddy who worked in this county on Motor Squad. That's actually a modded police bike.
Yes.
If that's the one I think it is.
If you want one, it's a
Oh,
Harley Davidson Electroglide police bike. And you can buy them in Europe, so.
Every day's a learning day, isn't it?
And it may or
Yes.
may not be even more modified than most of the bikes on the force, because it may or may not.
All right, look, let's bring it back. Let's bring
Yes,
it back
all
to
right,
Depp
so
Viher.
that's-
Sorry,
I'm just saying-
I know I made the interruption. Forgive
We
me.
can cut this out
I've
in
now broken
edits.
your flow twice.
No.
We
so
can cut this out in edits.
Give me your take.
The highest level is the defamation.
Yes.
But the defamation directly hinges on the domestic violence aspect
Yes,
of it.
Yeah.
yes.
And the domestic violence aspect, as I said to someone else the other day, winning a case in the USA, or in any courtroom for that matter, it's making a dollar out of 100 pennies. It's not making a dollar out of 4 quarters or 10 dimes. If you can get a quarter or a dime to help you get to the dollar, wonderful, congratulations. But for the most part, it's building just bit by bit by bit by bit. And that's what they were trying to do.
It's what they did in London.
Yes.
And succeeded.
Yes, yes. And that's what they were trying to do this afternoon. But
Because presumably there isn't much footage of domestic violence. It tends to happen behind closed doors. This is the thing. There is very rarely any kind of smoking gun.
and that brings up another interesting point, because clearly so much was going on in their relationship, as evidenced by the pictures of the paint on the walls and on the mirrors and on the lampshades and the blood on the floor and on the sofa and all of those types of things. And yet, she talked about the fact, or she alleged, that she was in effect abused in the same way that the lampshades were abused and that the bathroom mirrors were abused. And then they trotted out the pictures today, and everyone was standing there saying, busted lip, where's the busted lip? And it was not until they got to the 4th or 5th picture that there's this little thing on her lip, and well, as someone said, that could have been a cold sore.
Looked like
And-
the one that looked like blood looked more like lip gloss to me.
Right, and when she drew on the screen and she says, well, I have this bruise right here that she circled in yellow, and you just kind of thought to yourself,
It looks like a shadow.
yes, it
It
does.
looks like a
It does
shadow.
not look. compared to what
The drama of the words.
well, and compared to what some women or men look like after they have been in domestic violence situations, it's kind of like, all right, well, the bed is broken, the TV is smashed, there's allegedly all this glass all over the floor, and yet she's claiming that she was dealt the same level of harm.
I've got an attorney question for you. If the jury believe that on one occasion he laid a hand on her with force, with intent, is the case made out for her article? Is the truth element to her article made out?
Well, it's the short answer to that is yes, because all you have to do is be a domestic violence victim on one occasion.
To get a TRO and then
Or again, to prove the domestic violence element of
Right.
this, which then turns the dial on the defamation, the libel,
Yes.
the libel case
Yeah.
as well. But
But it was her, yes, she was referring to the TRO in the article. So there's a chain that
Yes.
that has to be made up in the jury's mind. So do you expect that when it comes to closing arguments, which we've now discovered will be on Friday the 27th of May, so this trial is going a day longer than we thought it would.
Yes.
It's going to be 5 days in the final week, which I think is just designed to kill all the journalists off, frankly. But
I'll tell you, it also, what it portends is that there are likely to be some very, very interesting additional witnesses that
over the next 2 weeks.
that the
yeah,
defense
yeah.
calls, because there's no way, Amber Heard is not going to be around.
No, she's
The
nearly
people-
done, isn't she? Yeah.
Yes, well, the
Gotta
people
be.
that she has to be cross-examined.
Yes, that's I think where we are now.
Even once and that will probably take, based on the amount of time that they've taken for direct examination, the cross-examination will probably take at least as long, if not longer.
Right, so we're looking at a day and a half.
But then there are all of these other people who will likely come in.
Obviously, I'm assuming they're going to bring her sister Whitney in.
We don't know. I mean,
We don't know.
She's
you
the only
guess there.
person who can testify
It's a kind
that
of
they saw it for firsthand,
But
based
she
on
has
today's testimony.
But she has a bias, though.
She does.
She has a bias, and
But
it would
couldn't
be
you say
and they
that
will exploit
Sean
that,
and
won't they,
Mark-
in cross-examination?
But couldn't you say
Yes.
that Sean and Mark have a bias?
sure.
Being
Sure.
Johnny Depp's paid bodyguards for how many years?
Well, even the independent
currently.
forensic psychologists, they went out of their way to saying you're being paid hundreds of dollars to give this testimony,
Right.
and you happen to come up with exactly the right evidence that your client wanted.
Which is not uncommon in that type of situation.
Do you not have a situation in American courts, because we have this in the UK courts, where the two experts from either side have to get together and write a paper on what they do agree, the common ground, which they then give to the judge?
No.
You see,
No, it's
so
all-
the judge will bring them together and they'll go, right, I know you're independent experts,
Yes.
but you've been hired by either side.
Yes.
Write me a document on what you can agree on. And that tends to be the most powerful document, because it's where the two independent experts from either side have common ground. And so the judge takes that very, very seriously. And then they can write a document on where they disagree.
Mm-hmm.
But he or she will bring them together and go, right, show me what you do agree on, because that is going to be the most powerful, independent, expert testimony. You don't have anything like that.
Well, we do have expert witness reports
Right.
that are submitted in advance,
But
and
they're
that are part
separate.
of the record.
There's no collaboration with the other side's expert witness.
No.
Right.
No.
So Liz, you've been sitting here with your book of notes, because you took notes, didn't you?
I did
during
take
during
notes.
it?
I did
and
take- I did take
without
notes. I
going
took-
into anything too graphic about what you heard today, what and you're allowed to refer to your notes. You're not an expert witness. I'm not going to pull you up on that.
I appreciate that, because I'm a little traumatized from
Well,
today.
was it the overall effect of today that wore you down, or was there something specific that triggered you?
I think it was just the beginning part of the day was a little bit more of a lull, and then just getting some of that background, and it wasn't.
Yes, because it was more about the jealous and controlling behaviour this
Right.
morning, and talking about how
Yeah.
Johnny Depp clearly didn't, well, according to her, didn't like her doing movies
Yep.
where she was required to do kissing or nudity scenes, and actually had a bit of a problem with her. It sounded like he had a bit of a problem with her having an acting career, which of course, controlling and jealous behaviour is one of the
Yeah.
signs of abuse, and that's why they were making such a thing of it this morning. But then it got heavier and heavier, didn't it, this afternoon, in terms of, I mean, it's quite, whoever's side you're on in this, if you have to take a side,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter really who you're rooting for or not. When you hear people speaking words like that in an open courtroom, it creates a response in you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's very cringeworthy and very. I mean, there's no question. There are a lot of moments.
Just because we're not
today-
used to hearing
That's-
detail like that said in a formal environment.
That's correct. There's a lot to make you squirm.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah, some of her descriptions at the end of the day were
Come on, you
awful.
pick out something from your notes.
So
You,
there was
you
something,
take all these notes.
I
You've
did.
got to
I
use
took a
them.
lot of notes.
You've got to use them.
There was one that I took early on in the day, and maybe you can test to this as well. But there was something relatively early where she was trying to get this question. She was objected to the same question posed like 4 different ways about a conversation that Amber Heard had with Lily Rose or about Lily Rose,
Yes.
Johnny Depp's daughter.
And understandably, Johnny Depp's legal team have been very keen to keep the children out of this and anything that they said out of this. And I think that there are very strong reasons for that. But yeah, go on.
And it was like, here's objection, and it's like every time she just kept trying to push this issue.
And this is Elaine Bredehoff to Amber Heard.
Yeah, and Depp's team is absolutely not having any of it, as they should be. And it was like, it just felt like she was just trying to force that down their throats. There was something there she really wanted that she wasn't going to get, and it seemed to be annoying to a lot of people in the courtroom.
Right. How long do you expect the jury to take to come to a verdict? Because that's a hot issue.
That's a very good question. And there's so many factors that can weigh into that.
First of all, they've got 3 days off. They've got Memorial Weekend. So the court finishes on a Friday the 27th. Then it's you've got the Memorial Day, haven't you, on the Monday following?
Correct.
So they won't be deliberating for 3 whole days.
Right.
Goodness knows what they'll forget in that time.
Well, yes and no. I mean, they are taking notes, and it will be interesting to see. Well, I won't say what I was thinking of saying, but if all of them are aligned in their thinking except for one, that one person can stretch the process out for a considerable length of time.
What's a considerable length of time? When they all want to go home, that's what I'm hoping. They'll all want to go home.
Well, in a lot of cases, that does become a factor, for better or worse. But you know what it all boils down to, and you may be familiar with the concept of jury instructions. Invariably, there are a set of questions that the judge puts to the jury and tells them, you need to answer this, this, and these are all vetted through. They're developed in consultation with the attorneys for each side as well. But the instructions basically are kind of, okay, this is how you're going to check the boxes, and we check these boxes, answer these questions, and when you have them aligned in a certain way, then come back and let's talk and tell us what it is that you've decided on. You know,
does it have to be unanimous? Do you have to have all 7 jurors deciding one way or another?
I don't know. I believe you do in a case like you don't always have to have all full full. Yes, it does not always have to be unanimous, but in what in the deliberations and so forth. But as far as the verdict is concerned, this brings up the concept of a hung jury,
right?
Where they absolutely, either because one or several people just cannot align with the other people, and a lot of times they will go out to the judge and they will say, we can't make a decision,
right?
And the judge will say, I think you need to go back in there and try harder.
Or can they say 5-2? I'll take 5-2.
No,
they can't direct like that. You can in the UK. You can say,
is that right?
Well, it's called a majority verdict. So
okay.
If it's not unanimous, I'll take a majority verdict. And you can go all the way down to, I think it's you go down to 9-3.
Interesting.
But the judge would say, if there's one outlier, then I'll take a majority, and it's usually like 11-1. That's the thing. But that is after a jury may have been deliberating for 3 or 4 days.
Yes. Right.
But what? So come on. What, in your experience, what's the longest you've seen a jury stay out for?
From my personal experience, I would say about a week. But again, that's for something where there's an enormous amount of evidence that they have to go back and plow through again and say, what do we all think about this? What do we all think about this, et cetera, et cetera.
That's such good news, John, because I've booked my flight for a week after Memorial Day, and I'm hoping that they'll come back in that week. Otherwise, I'm done.
But you said you wanted to see the USA. So
well, yeah, I've got to come to court every day in case the jurors come back in.
Well, this is true. This is true.
Do you know what? I come to America. I spent 3 days in New York before I came and flew into Washington, D.C. I've eaten more meals in Fairfax County Courthouse cafeteria than I will ever eat in America ever again. But lovely food, don't get me wrong. But
Yeah, the food here is great. by
but
the
I
way.
thought I was going to see a little bit more of the US.
Dr. Kipper, as a wedding present, gave Amber Heard, she called it a nightie.
Yep.
But by the description, can we all agree it was a negligee?
It sounded relatively flimsy, but I don't want to. I wouldn't. No, look, you're talking to two men.
Yes,
I'm no expert in female
It felt
nightwear.
The description seemed negligee.
I will take that from you.
And that seemed a little unprofessional for a doctor to give to a patient. It seemed a little fishy to me personally, but again, this is Hollywood, I don't know.
That's a great detail to pick up on. Of all the things that I could have asked you, that you could have brought up.
Yes.
When you go to a wedding, typically a lingerie,
Yes.
negligee, bedroom wear is not on the registry of
this
along
went-
with the
this
plates
went-
and the
But
glasses.
I did
and-
think
It's
a bit-
a common
I
gift
just
for
saw-
a bridal shower, and
Yes.
it's given by a fellow female.
I thought, what is the doctor giving her a wedding present in the first place for? I mean, that's
Like-
that's what struck me as odd. And then I just thought, oh, Hollywood. I didn't even think about the fact that it was female underwear.
It was nightie. It was a very
And we ought
silken
to-
with lace negligee described nightie.
And the reason it came up is because Amber Heard said that after she and Johnny had the big row in Australia, she woke up and found lumps of raw meat had been cut up and chopped, and her nightie had been ripped into bits, and the lumps of raw meat had been wrapped up by the nightie, and she kept finding it all around the house, which she, I think anyone would find a little disturbing, if her recollection is correct.
a lot disturbing.
A lot
Yeah, it
disturbing.
was-
But
yeah.
this is the thing, this keeps going back to if her recollection is correct, because so many people just say she's an out-and-out fantasist, she's an out-and-out liar, she's making all these details up, it didn't happen.
And again, the part of that I remembered most was, why did the doctor give her a negligee?
Yeah.
Go on.
She mentioned that she wasn't thinking about her pain and therefore she didn't feel the pain. And
Yeah.
that seemed a little...
That was after a graphic sexual assault was described to the court. Yeah.
when she was describing the
that's
incident
trauma,
in the,
isn't it?
Yeah. But
I don't know, I've never suffered
most-
trauma. Certainly
most
not
women
that
who
kind.
undergo that would admit the next day or two they will feel that pain. They know that pain is there. So for her to not know that she was in pain, and she also described, like, she said that she had been, like, she'd felt the glass under her feet in the moment, like when she was like kicking and things, and then she described that she didn't have any wounds there. She mentioned confronting him, but she also mentioned that he was passed out. So she said he was sleeping or passed out, and something happened, and she was with his iPad, and she confronted him,
Yeah.
but he was passed out.
Okay,
So
so there's
there
an
was-
inconsistency in
there
her
was-
evidence that
yeah.
you've brought up.
There was something there that just didn't make sense to me, because there was no, I woke him up to confront him. There was no, I confronted him. So was this man asleep and you just started yelling at him while he was asleep to wake him up? Or did you say, hey, we need to talk, can you wake up? Did you wait? It just felt very much so like he was asleep and now he's being confronted. And I would like to know the minutes between that, or the moments between that exactly, because that, again, that seemed like one of those moments that doesn't make sense.
Okay, I'm going to give you the final word, Liz, but I want to put one more question to John.
Yes.
Why are you here? Why did you get up so early I know you only live locally, and I know you've got a legal interest in this,
Yeah.
but I mean, I haven't seen... Actually, that's not true. I've seen lots of attorneys who work in this building were queuing up a couple of weeks ago when the queues weren't so long. But what brought you here? You don't see many older gentlemen
Sure.
lining up in the queue.
Well,
for this trial.
This is I am old enough to have vivid recollections of not only the Michael Jackson trial, but the O.J. Simpson trial back in the mid 1990s, where O.J. Simpson was a famous American
Yeah.
football player
Not guilty.
and who was alleged to have killed his wife.
In the UK, I viscerally remember watching the verdict come in. It was one of those moments.
Yes.
Like the JFK assassination that people of an older generation talk about. The OJ verdict was the big deal, wasn't it?
It was a very, very big deal. In a lot of ways, several thoughtful people have pointed out that verdict and the Rodney King verdict, which also involved it was in Los Angeles, but it involved a police beating of an African-American man named Rodney King. Those were some of the foundations of the dialogue that we're having today about Black Lives Matter, and it's just that they have matured over the course of 20, 25, 30 years and ripened to become the issues that they are today.
And bring in the Michael Jackson verdict as well? Because that, again, child abuse, essentially, that's bringing that to the table, isn't it?
Well, there's that, and there's also the fact I can't help but think about. You may recall having seen Michael Jackson would arrive in court and would get out and stand on the roof of his SUV and moonwalk and dance in his pajamas with an umbrella, looking very, very odd, wacko jacko, and that helped turn the entire proceeding into a bit of a circus. And there's a certain element of that here, because Johnny Depp arrives in court every day in an SUV with all the windows down, blasting the stereo. He picks a song of the day, and he arrives, and of course the crowd goes wild, and they wave at him, and he waves back, and then he walks into the courthouse through the back door. And there's just a certain similarity to that. As far as my personal interest, though, again, they referred to the O.J. Simpson trial as the trial of the century. And in a lot of ways, this is an analog to that. And a lot of friends of mine from California said to me, this is enormous, enormous front page news in Los Angeles Times newspaper, in Variety, which is a tabloid that covers, a tabloid in the...
It's the Hollywood industry Bible, isn't it? Really?
Yes, it is. Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly. It's not a tabloid in the sense of it's a gossip newspaper.
No,
this is
almost a trade rag, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So, and people kept saying to me, this is happening 10 miles from where you live. Why are you not over there, partaking in, and getting the vibe of this firsthand?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And I mean, for instance, I got up this is the second time I've been here. The first time I got up at 2 a.m. I was in line at 3 a.m. and I was spectator number 44. And this morning, I did exactly the same thing, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and by the time I got up to the table, I got bracelet number...
You were after me, and I'm 81.
I'm 90. So I made it...
Look at Overflow Court Boy over here.
Oh, yes. Yes. But it is, in a lot of ways, a trial of the century. And people have written... I've posted Facebook postings about this, and people have repeatedly written to me and said, I am so jealous that you have an opportunity to see this.
That's interesting, because there are so many people who said to me, why are you interested in that showbiz tittle-tattle? And I'm like, no. There are cultural fault lines running through this case.
There are.
And you spoke very eloquently about how the O.J. Simpson trial and the Rodney King police officer trial had reverberations. What do you see as the reverberations of this trial being going forward through history?
Well, again, it's going to be, as I was saying, part of the overall collective societal viewpoint of the Me Too movement.
Yep.
To what extent are we talking about the believability of a woman who claims that she has been the victim of a very, very serious set of domestic violence abuses? And let's not forget as well that there are two concurrent lawsuits running here back and forth. He's claiming that she ruined his career. She is suing him and suing for $50 million. She is suing him for $100 million for basically the same issue on a claim that his former attorney, who spoke on his behalf,
was authorized to do so by him,
correct,
and therefore he was defamatory.
And referred to her allegations against him as a hoax. So there's that entire...
It still hasn't been properly addressed in this trial. The counterclaim has not been properly addressed.
That's correct.
I have a feeling that will come.
So that's a tactical thing, because Adam Waldman is hanging over the Amber Heard's attorneys like a kind of bogeyman. They keep dropping him into conversation. He keeps being asked about by Amber Heard's attorneys. So one presumes that they are going to take what evidence they've got and add that to whatever they want to use into the second half of this trial.
Yes, and I thought it was very interesting today that she, on multiple occasions, I think 2 or maybe 3, she directly admitted having hit him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, whether that was in response to him hitting her, I wasn't paying that close attention, and that'll be, again, a question when the time comes for the jury to say...
Goes back to the reactive violence thing that we heard about from Dr. Dawn Hughes, didn't it?
And a lot of that was, most of it was her saying that it was reactive. It was...
Self-defense is another sort of way of describing reactive violence.
Well, and
Listen, it's been lovely talking. I could talk for another hour. Unfortunately,
You need to go
I need to
back
go
to
and
flight.
do a
You've gotta go
newsletter.
back to DC.
This YouTube update has to finish at some stage.
It's
So
almost
I'd like to say thank you very much indeed, John Witherspoon. It's been a real honour to meet you, a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for teaching me a bit more about this process. I should be learning more, but I'm just stuck in the actual content of the
I
trial.
can understand. Yeah.
Yeah, but fielding questions from my British friends going, why are they doing that? What's going on here? It's as I say, it's similar but very different to the UK. And Liz, thank you so much for coming back. I really
Hey.
do appreciate it. I got lots of emails about how great Liz was, so I thought, well,
Good.
bring her back for park bench number 2. I've had Becca on twice, I've had you on twice, so we'll see who wins by the end of the trial. But John, Liz, thank you so much. And that's the end of week 4, day 4, day 16 if you're counting all the days. We've got a 10-day break. We'll be back on Monday the 19th. Monday the 16th.
16.
And then we've got 2 weeks where we'll be doing really, really long court days. And the
9 to
final week,
5.
we'll be doing 5 days of 9 to 5. I can't wait.
Right.
See you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
My thanks to John, and nice to have Liz back on so soon, wasn't it? I had a couple of messages and a lovely email about Liz saying, get her on again, get her on again. And actually, Liz burst out of court about half an hour before we finished and was feeling actually quite shaken and a little upset by what she'd heard. So I thought it would be interesting to get her experience. I hope you enjoyed some elements of that conversation. I'm sorry we couldn't be too specific about what we heard. If you want to go online, you will find all the full details, but I'm mindful that this YouTube channel is being watched by a lot of people who may have different sensitivities. So it's there if you want to go hunting for it, but it's not going to be made explicit on reporting Depp v. Heard. Maybe I'm being British and prudish, I don't know. This has been a really intense and grueling 4 weeks, but I've been buoyed up by the lovely comments that I've received from people who've been watching this channel, so thank you very much to you for that. We are now on a break. We have a 10-day hiatus, so there will be no more YouTube updates unless I'm feeling moved to tell you something from anything I've learned over the course of the next 10 days, but chances are I will be back on the 16th of May with another YouTube update. The reason we're having this break is because the judge has to go to a conference. The trial was originally going to be just 4 weeks. Then there was a move by the parties to have it extended to 6 weeks, and the judge said, well, I've got this conference, so you can have it extended by a couple of weeks, but I am still going to the conference. So we are going to come back on the other side of the judge's availability. We have been informed that we are now going from 9 to 5 on every day that court is sitting, and that the final week of the trial will be 5 days long. Then there is a 3-day holiday, and then that week afterwards we are expecting the jury to come back with a verdict. But as you heard from John, it has to be unanimous, and if it's not, then the problem starts. So goodness me, it's very noisy. If you can't hear the geese, you may have just heard the horn going off in the background. It's probably a sign for me to get out of here. So look, have a nice break from reporting Depp v. Heard. Thank you very much for the kind words of support and all the eyeballs and likes. If you want to subscribe, I'd be very grateful. If you want to help donate towards my work, then all you have to do is go to reportingdeppvheard.net/newsletter and sign up for the newsletter, which I must now go back to my apartment and write. So thank you very much. See you on the other side.